Wow, hey, so this is like the worst episode of Black Mirror ever, am I right? Hey guys, Trey Ratcliff here, long time no see. I want to talk to you a little bit about a breakthrough I had that hopefully will help you or someone you love that I had last week at a meditation and yoga retreat. All right. By the way, I know normally people come here to the channel to get art, photography, creativity stuff. This is not about that. These are mind vitamins to help your mind in this weird time. However, if you do want something like that, I decided to make my best tutorial about beginning photography totally free. There's a link down below. You'll love it. Something to do, you know, while you're isolating. Yeah, just get it. You don't even need your email. There's no sales funnel. Just enjoy. All right, a little gift for you. Yeah, so what's going on? Okay, I'm here, day one, level 4 lockdown, Queenstown, New Zealand. Self-isolation. I'm here in my little cabin, my little Jacob's cabin, my Unabomber manifesto writing cabin. It's great. I'm here by myself. And I thought I would make a few videos to help you guys out there with your minds and make sure everything is copacetic, right? Because I've done a lot of deep dives here and I've got some stuff that I think might help you. All right, at least I hope it does. All right, let's back up a notch here. What started this little story? Well, about 3 weeks ago, I started doing the math on COVID-19 because I'm a math nerd. And I thought, man, this is not going to be a good ride. It's going to get rough out there. And then I noticed myself every day crying, you know, like 5, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at a time. I thought, this is weird because I didn't exactly know what I was crying about. It wasn't anxiety or fear. You know, I know how to deal with that. I've got a really good toolbox for dealing with those things, right? And I know not everybody does, by the way. Maybe I'll make another video about that, about how to help with that, because I know that's a very real thing. But it was something else, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Now, I'm no stranger to crying. I do cry a lot, but I would call it more like Pixar crying, you know? Like at the end of a Pixar movie, you start crying, you're like, oh, Pixar, you did it again. That kind of cry. That's not really a happy or a sad cry, it's just more of like a transcendent cry, which is great and healthy and fun and good. Nothing wrong with that. But this was something different, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And then I would talk to some of my friends, and they were going through the same thing. They would just spontaneously cry throughout the day. And, you know, I would kind of, in my head, separate my friends into different groups. I don't really do that, but some people like have like real anxiety in their life, right? Maybe it's like financial, they lost their job or getting a pay cut or family stuff. Like these are anxieties that are very real and very significant. But sometimes that can become conflated with this overall malaise that I was feeling. So then I have another group of friends who have no financial worries. You know, either they have a war chest or they have family and friends that'll take care of them. They're okay. So they don't have those very real anxieties. But yet they were crying randomly every day like me. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on up there? You know, I'm very introspective, and not that I can figure everything out, but I was curious about it, right? And by the way, if you're encountering these things, you should probably talk to like an actual psychotherapist, not me. I'm just an armchair psychotherapist, but I have made some breakthroughs that maybe will get your mind going in another direction, like give you another perspective on how you're experiencing reality as it is. So I headed off to this meditation yoga retreat with that as one of my main intentions. Like, what's going on with this existential crisis? And we had a great group of people. We're down the road about 45 minutes down near Glenorchy to this place called Aroha. Great retreat. By the way, we were the last cohort, the last group to go down. They had to shut it down. They'll reopen, you know, after this miasma has dissipated. Yeah, Queenstown, New Zealand down here, we've come down to a complete shutdown. Not just lockdown, but like no tourists. It's terrible because this town depends on tourism, and I feel so bad. for the, the businesses, but really the people behind the businesses. There's so many small businesses and restaurants. It's just terrible. I just feel helpless, it's really bad. And so that's part of it too, this hopelessness and this helplessness about what's happening in the greater world. I see all this unconscious behavior, and it's just kind of sickening. So I went into it with the intention of like, what's happening? I'm a very empathetic person, blah, 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 but still, what is it? So after a lot of silence there, a lot of meditation, even silent walks, a lot of times in no thought. This will sound completely ridiculous if you're not into meditation, this kind of this line of questing, in that at some point, hopefully early in the process, you realize that you're not the thoughts in your head. You're the loving silence behind the thoughts. You can just watch them go by like clouds, right? You never say like, oh, that's a shit looking cloud. So you can watch these thoughts go by without judgment. And in that silence, you can find amazing breakthroughs and really find out a lot about yourself and discover things that maybe an overly busy mind might be clouding from you. And so a few days into it, I realized, oh, I know what's happening. Of course, I've already buried the lead in I don't know what I'm going to title this video, but I'll probably put it in there. What I was encountering is a big word. It's despair. And I had never encountered it before. And moreover, I came to the meta realization now that there are hundreds of millions of people around the earth that are also experiencing despair for the very first time, right? And there's no toolbox on how to handle it, right? So I was kind of on a quest to figure out, what is the toolbox? How do you handle this? And also keep in mind, if you look at the bigger picture of the spectrum of emotions that people encounter in a lifetime, most people will never encounter despair, okay? Thank God. Anecdotally, what's an example of despair as opposed to anxiety? Well, if you're watching some international news show and you see there's this war-torn area and there's this mom and she's pulling her dead son out of the rubble and holding him and crying and wailing, that's despair, right? You wouldn't look at that and say like, oh, well, she has a lot of anxiety. It's not anxiety. There's a big difference, right? Between, or if you lose a child or lose a really close loved one, despair is a real thing. But most people don't encounter that. They might, like I lost my dad last year. In my case, it wasn't despair, it was grief. And there is toolbox for, working through that as it passes. So then I felt, okay, great, Trey, great job. You've defined it as despair, which actually did help me on a certain level because I wondered, is it just like extreme anxiety and extreme fear? Because I am not afraid of death at all. At all. I've had 3 full death experiences where I've left and come back into my body. I can make another video about that if you want me to. I won't go into it now. But anyway, suffice to say, I have no fear of death, so that wasn't it. And just being able to separate it from anxiety. Like I listen to Sam Harris and a lot of other podcasters, and they have chalked this up to anxiety and fear. I'm going a step further and saying it's despair. Now, maybe this is just me, right? Maybe this is just what me and my friends have been encountering, because I came back and I talked about my findings with them, and they said, you should definitely make a video about it. And I said, I guess I will. So here's my video. So, okay, great. That did help to flip a switch in my head that I could categorize it as despair. Keeping in mind that there's no need to categorize everything in your life, right? Especially some of these soft things in your mind. You can make a strong case that actually human language is quite deleterious to figuring out what actual reality and consciousness is, because as we try to define things and put things into little boxes scientifically, we limit them. However, I have found it's helpful on an intellectual level to define it as different from anxiety, fear, despair. Okay, great. So what do you do about it? What do you do about despair? And not that you have to do something about everything. There's not like a solution to every problem. Like we do live in a world where like, what's the problem? What's the solution, right? This is a little poisonous in a way. Like there's not always a solution to everything. Sometimes you just let things, let things live their own life in their own way. But I'm still curious, like, what can I do about it? And of course, there's no scientific, solution to despair. So in terms of like, what do you do? So often I turn to like the humanities, like arts, creativity, philosophy, poetry, to help with these matters, right? And so, I'm like a helpless romantic, and I read a lot of poetry. Not like romantic love poetry, but like helpless romantic in the terms of like getting on a train in Europe in the 1700s to take a little train journey, this sort of romanticism. And so in that way, I like poetry. And I just serendipitously had come with a book from one of my favorite poets, David Whyte. He's an Irish poet. And I'll link to one of my favorite poems down below. You can hear him recite it. He's incredible. So besides writing poetry, he also writes books. And this book that I happen to have is about 50 chapters. And in each chapter, he takes a different word and he talks about it, right? He doesn't really redefine it, but he gives it like a much better definition than Webster's ever could, right? Especially something like, despair, which, Webster's can never properly define. It takes a more softer, lyrical approach. And he has different chapters of the book, like one on friendship, loneliness. And as you read about these things, you're like, oh, these things are neither good nor bad, but they give you a beautiful perspective. Anyway, so he just happened to have a chapter on despair. And it was beautiful. And I'll paste it down below so you can read it in your own time. But his basic premise is beautiful in that despair is like a season, right? It comes and it goes. And it's nice to think about it like that. I'll read a few paragraphs from it. I can't do an Irish accent. God, I wish I could. A few years ago, I thought, I'll never learn another language. I'm way too lazy bones. But wouldn't it be cool if you could like learn accents? Because, you hear people that can do accents, you're like, oh. But then I never learned any accents either because I'm too lazy. All I have is this one and like an old Texas oil man's accent, which I will not read this in because that would not be apropos. All right, anyway, here we go. Despair turns to depression and abstraction when we try to make it stay beyond its appointed season and start to shape our identity around its frozen disappointments. But despair can only stay beyond its appointed time through the forced artificiality of created distance, by abstracting ourselves from bodily feeling, by trapping ourselves in the disappointed mind, by convincing ourselves that the seasons have stopped and can never turn again. By convincing ourselves that the seasons have stopped and can never turn again. And perhaps, most simply and importantly, by refusing to let the body breathe by itself, fully and deeply. Despair is kept alive by freezing our sense of time and the rhythms of time, when we no longer feel imprisoned by time, and when the season is allowed to turn, despair cannot survive. And then I'll skip a paragraph. Not that it's not a good paragraph, they're all great, but I'll just give you one more amuse-bouche. And I'm going to repeat a trick that I stole from David Whyte. You'll see when you see him speak his poetry that he'll take a line and he'll repeat it. Because sometimes some of these little passages are so beautiful that you don't want them to get lost in the flow of what's happening. The antidote to despair is not to be found in the brave attempt to cheer ourselves up with happy abstracts. The antidote to despair is not to be found in the brave attempt to cheer ourselves up with happy abstracts, but in paying profound and courageous attention to the body and the breath, independent of our imprisoning thoughts and stories. Even strangely, in paying attention to despair itself and the way we hold it, and in which we realize was never ours to own and to hold in the first place. To see and experience despair fully in our body is to begin to see it as a necessary seasonal visitation, and the first step in letting it have its own life, neither holding it nor moving it on before its time. Isn't that beautiful? How do these guys do that stuff? Isn't it great? Yeah, so I hope this gives you something to think about. You know, maybe something I said has struck a chord in you, like, oh yeah, maybe that's what I'm going through. And don't expect it to like flip immediately. You're not like cured or whatever. You know, you got to let it vibrate through you, let it flow through you, have time. And maybe even this idea, you might need to integrate this for 24, 48 hours, read through all these paragraphs, do your own work, do your own self deep diving. That's important. By the way, some of these paragraphs are pretty thick, pretty dense. You might have to read them a few times because there's a lot of ideas in there, and that's perfectly okay and normal. All right. If you like this, I'll make more videos, share it with your friends if you think it'll be helpful. In all my, you know, for the last, I don't know, 15 years, ever since I got into photography and art, I've just started learning so much stuff about myself and the world, and I'm obsessed with like reality and consciousness, and my little 3 rules for life are pretty simple. It's just like be loving and be kind and help other people. So, you know, I'm here to help you. Let me know. And I'll leave you with one last idea, one last little mind vitamin that I hope helps. And that is that the government is terrible at marketing. My God, they are the worst. And, you know, they're making this idea of self-isolation or isolation seem like a punishment, and people are scared. And they're like, we better do this. You know, we got drones outside your door or something. If they were smart, which they're not, that's why people work in the government, because they can't get jobs anywhere else. But if they were smart, they would package this as like, hey, guys, this is a chance to get to know yourselves, right? You get to spend weeks or months off, you know, by yourself or with loved ones. When you think about self-isolation, think about like isolating within yourself. Is it that, you know, a lifelong goal to know thyself? A lot of people are afraid to sit in a room by themselves with their own thoughts or the lack of their own thoughts and endlessly distract themselves. So this is a great chance, you know, for you to start taking these baby steps. You're not going to get it all figured out. You're not going to get yourself figured out in, you know, just a few weeks or a few months, but you can begin. And I'll put a few resources down below if you want to, like, I'll put Sam Harris's app down below, which is great. He's got these little 10-minute meditations you can do every day. Simple. You just listen to his dulcet tones and he'll guide you through these things. I think like the first 10 are free and then it costs money, but he's a cool, woke dude, right? And so, like, if you can't afford it, just email him and he'll give it to you for free, which I think is really nice of him because he doesn't want money to get in the way of, you know, your own growth or our own growth together. All right, hey, we're all in this thing together, right? Right? Okay, well, I hope you liked that little different sort of take here from Trey, different sort of take from Trey. Let me know if you like it. I can always do more. Happy to help. You know, I've got nothing else to do. Just sitting here in my Unabomber cabin. Either I help you or I write a manifesto. I'll make another video about what I get up to on a daily basis here in my little Jacob's cabin. All right, you guys. Love you and take care of yourselves. The better you take care of yourselves, the better you can take care of other people. All right. Love you. See you next time. Bye.